Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jaya Kula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Alliance is one of the fundamental ways that things work here. The idea that anybody or anything does anything alone outside of alliance is something that we are taught. It's an unexamined artifact from some cultures here. The way that we value independence is an artifact. And as a matter of fact, we have no independence. Zero. You can't take one breath without the participation of the entire planet. The concept of alliance points toward that. We are aligned with, collaborating with, dependent upon everything else that's going on here. So that's the overarching principle that we're working with. And as we begin to notice more and more how we are being supported by everyone and everything, then we become sensitized to how alliance is working in our lives, and we begin to be able to participate more in alliance with more awareness and more skillfully. So we start to go along with that natural principle. We stop valuing our independence, and we start valuing, appreciating, and enjoying alliance more. One of the major images that's used to describe what's happening here is a city. In the tantric traditions of India, manifest life is sometimes referred to as a city. And a city, as I've said many times before, is a place where we go to participate. Right? It's not a place where we go to enact dramas of independence. We could go to a shack for that. Even then, we're dependent on all of the things that grew the wood for our shack and all of the people who made the tools that we use to build our shack. And again, the whole planet and anything that we eat and everything that grew everything that we eat. So even if we went out to a shack, the archetypal shack in Wyoming, even if we did that, we would still be totally 100% in alliance and dependent on the world. Off-grid is just on a different grid. One time I knew this teacher at university when I was teaching who wrote a book, and he bragged to me about, this is something I did on my own. Unbelievable. First of all, he had a wife at home taking care of the household and all the bills and organizing his whole life for him while he wrote this book. Then he had all of the teachers that he learned from and all of the colleagues that he learned from, his entire education and every conversation he ever had that informed how he wrote that book, and all the food he ate while he wrote the book, and the book itself, and everyone who made all of the materials he needed to make that book, and the electricity that went into his computer while he was writing that book. And you can go on and on infinitely. There's just infinite aspects to alliance. On another level, we all are limited, right? We're just naturally limited. And we become less limited as we do practice, but we are all naturally limited. And when we value alliance and we recognize the utility and beauty of alliance, we can make alliances with people who are less limited in areas where we're limited. And they can make alliance with us in areas where they're more limited and we're less limited. So we can join together and support each other in areas where each of us needs support. That's also really sweet. And we recognize something we're not that good at, or something that's difficult for us, or an area of confusion in our lives, right? Then we can find other people who aren't as confused or limited in those areas who can help us out. Alliance is everywhere. It's the entire manifest world. Every part of our lives is shaped by alliance. And since that is our fundamental condition, the best thing that we can do is to start noticing it more and start participating with more awareness and appreciation. When people say I did this on my own, or I'm proud of having done this myself, or whatever, they're just lying to themselves, basically. But if they really had to do it themselves, they wouldn't like it. If you wanted to write a book where you had to go out and generate your own electricity, would you like that? You had to manufacture your own oxygen. I mean, I don't know how you would do that, but people who say, I don't like groups, I understand that on one level, but on another level, you're never not in a group. You just can't ever be not in a group. It's not possible.
I imagine a lot of people wanting to go off grid or like make their own food. Sometimes it is this fantasy of independence, but is it also like a divestment? Like not independent from everything in the world, but independent from something which you find coercive?
Absolutely. I mean, the other side of this is we can live any form of life, absolutely any form of life, and be in alliance with the world. The actual form of life doesn't really matter that much. So I could be sitting on a mountain in a loincloth. Yeah, right. But for the sake of argument, I could be sitting on a mountaintop cafe. I could be sitting in a mountaintop, never talking to anybody for the rest of my life, and I would still be fully 100% participating. It just wouldn't look like what we think of when we think of participation. But if I have the attitude that I'm doing it alone, that's the problem, not what I'm actually doing. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Even if you're in the shack, you feel like you're in the city. You just happen to be in a shack.
Every millimeter of life is full. There isn't really any aspect of life that's more or less full than any other aspect of life. Everything is a city. You know those videos where they zoom in and out? Like they zoom out to like the outer reaches of space and they zoom into the inner reaches of atomic particles. Everything is like that. Think of like the infinite layers there are to everything. Oh my God. If you look at an electron micrograph of a cell, a human cell, it looks like a city. It looks like a jeweled city. Everything is crowded. Everything is full. Purna Brahma Narayani. Everything is full of awareness and energy, and therefore full of that creative output. So even if you're out in the woods in a shack, the wood has texture and grain, and you're surrounded by plants and animals, and everything has texture, color, form, grain, smell. Everything is completely full.
Would you talk about Purna Brahma Narayani a little more?
Well, Purna means full. Brahma is the creative principle. Narayani is the Shakti of the creative force. This was actually a phrase of Ma's. She said, Purna Brahma Narayani. Everything is full of creativity, that creative principle, and full of, with no gaps. That's what that means.
My question has to do with reincarnation and ancestors. I just wanted to kind of know how to approach it from a Trika point of view. What happens when there's reincarnation and why are there ancestors and why are they stuck and why they're still present?
Reincarnation is a name, a label, or a category for a certain set of things that people have experienced. Enough people experience these phenomena over time, and then we come up with a name for them. This is a human convention. We made this term up to try to describe a certain set of experiences. And the particular set of experiences it's describing is people who have a great degree of continuous memory between one life and another, which is not really that common. More common is people have random memories of whatever and they don't even know where they came from. And then even more common than that is people don't even think about it and don't care about it and don't pay any attention to it. So the idea is this, like from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective, because I think in Tibetan Buddhism is where reincarnation has been honed to a fine art. They seem to care more about it than any other culture on earth. Not that other cultures don't have concepts of reincarnation, but, in Tibetan Buddhism, reincarnation is basically an industry. So what this means is that someone has such a strong, unified direction that set of feelings, habits, and memories is so strong, it has so much momentum that it coheres or adheres even through the bardos of death. Now, what's said to happen to most of us schlubs is that we die, we get into the bardos, and we just kind of disperse because we're all over the place. We don't really have that kind of unified direction, right? We're just kind of like, little bit of us goes over here, another little bit goes over there. If we have a very strong realm vision, we're like, okay, let me go hang out with the hungry ghosts, something like that. But if we have a very strong habit of sadhana, we've organized our lives around this, and we have, again, become more open in our perceptions, and we have this very strong desire in this direction, then we have the possibility to have more continuous memory between one form that this pattern takes and another form that this pattern takes, which we call a new life. And you'll notice, if you know anything about Tibetan Buddhism, that even the lamas who are called reincarnates, like they're officially reincarnated, who have strong memories of some other life, they don't have complete memories of other lives. They're fragmentary. So it does lend a flavor, and it lends some skill to the life that they're in now, but it's not like a whole life is being remembered, even by someone who is considered to be a reincarnate. And it usually has to be sort of cultivated or encouraged in some way, that memory. The other aspect of this question is, so those ancestors that are being celebrated, worshipped, communed with are not reincarnated, probably. Maybe some little pattern of theirs is reincarnated, like Uncle so-and-so who spent his whole life complaining about something or other, now someone else is complaining about the same thing. I don't know. But whatever habit patterns and emotional patterns are strongest, for better or worse, those are the ones that are going to keep sticking together like carpet lint through the bardos. But that doesn't make someone like an official reincarnate. That's just ordinary death and ordinary birth. The other aspect of this is linear time versus Maha time. And this is a little bit harder to grasp. Most of us, anyway, are having an experience of linear time. And linear time is part of impermanence. It's an aspect of impermanence. And it is produced because of impermanence. So we have an experience of linear time because we are living in impermanence and things are coming and going in a seemingly sequential way. We have this experience in impermanence that we're born, we live, and then we die. We have an experience of the seasons, etc. We have lots of experiences of linearity here. And this is actually what is producing the experience of linear time. But in point of fact, linear time is an experience. It isn't the fundamental reality. It's an experience that's available in the fundamental reality. So it's not like fake or anything. It's a real experience, but it's not the ultimate, right? So the ultimate is something that is sometimes called Maha time or great time or all at onceness. And in that sense, everything that has ever happened and everyone who has ever lived is still with us in some way or another. That's why, even though people have died and they're not reincarnates, we can still have experiences of communicating with the dead because they're in Maha time.
I have a question about past lives and ancestors, a follow-up question. If we're just a continuation of these patterns from life to life, is there anything new, or what's the new thing?
Yeah, we're not just a continuation. I didn't say that. What I said was that the strongest patterns continue. one of the principles of reality is that certain ways that reality works repeat themselves at every level of reality, from the most contracted to the most exalted and enlightened. We'll find the same patterns repeated, but differently. Think of what happens with DNA, right? When a child is conceived, the DNA of both parents recombines, right? It's called recombination. And all of the different aspects of the DNA just kind of move around, and you get something that's sort of vaguely related to the parents, but it's also completely new. This is exactly what happens when you die. Depending on you and your unique dimension and what you've done in your life, certain things might be sort of the same, but then other things are recombined from God knows where. Like, you're in the Bardos and like other stuff is coming from other lives and recombining with you, just like DNA. It's this exact same principle. DNA is the gross, contracted, most tangible form of this process, but everything else works the same way in terms of how things are created differently. Everything gets recombined. Or you could think of that in terms of music, right? We have scales. They're the same notes in every scale, but they get recombined to make wildly many, many different kinds of music. I might, for instance, write some music that has very lightly and faintly a theme from somebody else's music that you might recognize. Oh, that's a continuation. But then there's lots of other things that are very different. Satsang with Shambhavi is produced by Jaya Kula, a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. If you enjoyed listening, please help us keep this podcast and many other teachings open to all by making a monthly or one-time donation. Visit jayakula.org to make a donation and explore more of our offerings.